going to shift gears again and go back to a personal story, because technology and PropTech is about product technology and data and all these things, but it's above and beyond anything else. It's about the people who drive those projects. And every startup, as we saw earlier with Steph, is a story of resilience, is a story of perseverance. So it's a real privilege today to hear from Kylie Dillon. She's the founder and CEO of Realtime Conveyancer, and she has an extraordinary story to tell us today about navigating loss, navigating innovation, and navigating perseverance in one of PropTech's probably most demanding sub-segments or sectors. So she'll be in a conversation today with Tom Ellis from Reach Australia, and I'm looking forward to hearing their stories.
Okay. Greetings. Thanks, everyone. So for some context, I represent Reach and Second Century Ventures, and we're an investor in Kylie's business. Kylie is a phenomenal entrepreneur, great business person, and an incredible human. And we're going to talk a bit about her journey. I'm going to sort of help guide her sharing a few things. We're also great friends personally, which is dangerous. So I think when we thought about the context for this, we thought, what would be interesting for a lot of you in the room to hear? I believe that there's a vision that is portrayed and understood of Kylie as being, you know, vivacious, exciting, and an awarded entrepreneur. But I think there's a depth to this story that everyone should hear, because there's a lot more complexity. I've been on the journey with you for a few years. I don't know all of it, but let's dive in. So Kylie, that's kind of my version of it. Can you give us in the room, as open as you're prepared to be, a snapshot on what's brought you here? I'm deviating from the questions, by the way.
No, that's fine. This is actually a story I've never told completely, so bear with me because it is tough. So I have a conveyancing business. Well, I had a conveyancing business. I'm incredibly passionate about conveyancing and the people in it. Conveyancing has been a heavily paper-based industry. There'd been no change in it for about 150 years until PEXA first came to play. And when PEXA came into play, I had an opportunity to spend some time working with them. And my role was, I still say to this day, I had the best role. And that was really traveling the world. And I got to spend some time in the US understanding what the future of buying and selling property looked like. But what was the future of conveyancing going to look like? And in my own business, I had a vision of what I thought that was going to look like, but there was nothing available in Australia that was meeting my vision. So it was during that process of speaking to sellers, buyers, real estate agents, finance brokers, and conveyancers, but largely the consumers. And they were telling me that the conveyancing experience was incredibly stressful. It gave them anxiety. It was traumatic. It was a black hole. They had no idea what was going on. It took an emotional toll, and they used words such as shit and fucked. And as a conveyancer,
broken. Let's go with broken.
But as a conveyancer, that was incredibly hard to hear, because I was so passionate about what I did, and I thought that we were all doing a fabulous job in giving our consumers what they needed. But it turns out that we weren't. We were missing a vital piece. And so what followed on from that was, well, hang on a sec. If we're going to build some technology to give the consumers this amazing experience, because now that I became aware of that, I almost felt an obligation to deliver on it, because I couldn't take that news and then do nothing with it. So then we set about building the technology that was going to go hand in hand with that, in an industry that is incredibly compliant, highly legislated, highly regulated, and targeted by fraud and crime. So we knew it was going to be no mean feat.
And importantly, KDD conveyancing was incredibly successful. So it came from a position of expertise in the market. And I don't think you give that enough credit, where PEXA tapped you on the shoulder and said, you're the expert in this space. Can you come give us a hand and show us what we're missing? So there's a lot of, very credentialed experience that goes into that.
Thank you. So Mike and I set about creating Realtime Conveyancer. Mike was also in a contract role at PEXA, which is how we met, wonderful human. He had a technology company based in New Zealand. So we spent a couple of months talking about what we thought the future could look like in terms of the technology that we could build. We sat down, we had a conversation. I said, Mike, how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? He said, it's going to cost $650,000 and take 8 months.
And how much did it cost so far?
It's been $10 million in 5 years. Benefit of hindsight, knowing what I know now, and of course thinking it makes no sense to me that an industry that is so incredibly compliant, legislated and regulated, you could build something for 650,000. So the deal was I had another business which I sold my half share of, and I put my half share of the 650,000 straight into Realtime. And Mike was meant to be putting his amount of money into the tech company in New Zealand. At the very same time we launched Realtime, COVID hit, and Mike being based in New Zealand, 5-hour time difference, it made building Realtime a real challenge. So we had very limited time. My day started around 3 a.m. and his tended to finish, as late as he possibly could so that we could get the most out of our day. We hit a point about 6 months in where Mike became a little bit more unavailable during our interactions, a little bit more off grid, started to sort of go probably off script, off topic, and I couldn't really get out of him what was going on.
Just startup stuff, right?
Yeah, well, that was it. He was like, we're just really, really busy. But it turns out that Mike had found out he was unwell and he didn't want to share this information with me. And so the further we got in, so say about 3 months after I became aware that he had been diagnosed with cancer, my immediate thought was I need to get my ducks in a row, and at an incredibly emotional and sensitive time for Mike, I needed him to understand that I needed him to resign as a director because I did not want to be in business with his family or his business partner in New Zealand. I also needed to know that my investment was going to be safe. And so as I started to, engage a lawyer, get that documentation underway, I then needed to start to unpack just how much money, where do we sit financially in terms of how much of the build had we paid off, and were we equally invested in the platform. It turns out Mike had not been putting his money into the business, and he died owing me $477,000.
Might just pause there for a second because I know how heavy that is. And
Yeah,
I think it's important everyone hears this because building these things is hard, but it's so much harder than what you see. I'm just giving Kylie a little bit of space for this because it's hard.
Yeah.
And I think what it takes to be an award-winning entrepreneur that's up in lights is to turn up every day and keep going. And I think that's something that in the midst of COVID, when your co-founders died and you're working through how do we make sure this doesn't fall apart, a level of realness that kind of comes together. So I think touching on where you found that support might be helpful for some of the people here.
Yeah, well, I didn't really talk about it because it was incredibly sensitive for Mike's family, and I needed to work through that with Mike's family. So, and because Mike died so quickly after a diagnosis, I didn't even have any time really to sit down and talk to his family about it. So I had to wait until obviously all of that had passed, and then work through, how was I going to get my $477,000 back? And I never did, because unfortunately Mike died with no assets. So what I did do is come to an arrangement with his children in terms of the shares that were allocated to Mike, and I took some of those and left his family with the rest because I felt so bad that they did not know any of this and they just sort of kept getting surprise after surprise after surprise. So that was a terrible experience for them as well. Nobody came out of it unscathed. But it took me back to a moment in time where the CEO of PEXA at the time was Marcus Price. And Marcus had given me 3 pieces of advice. And that was 1, be very careful who you go into business with. 2, don't risk a house. And 3, know when to quit. Well, I'd already screwed up 2 of those. So I was like, well, I'm that far in now. I'm just going to keep going. But that aside, I deeply, deeply believed in what we were doing. There was no part of me that was in conflict. There was no part of me that wanted to quit. We had users that were using our platforms, that they had taken their business and put their whole business in our hands. There was a lot of trust that had been given to us. And if anything, that sort of became the driver. But what I needed to do then, I identified very, very quickly, was I needed to go out and I needed to raise capital. So I jumped onto Google and found some guy in Applecross that delivered a 24-hour session on how to raise capital. I then went to...
That wasn't me, by the way.
If I had have known you, then it would have come in handy. So I did a course, a real quick one on how to raise capital. I then went to my accountant and who had a corporate advisor arm, and he said, how much do you need? I said, 1.5 million with no science behind it. I needed 1.5 million. And he said, we can raise you $2 million in 2 weeks. You'll have to give us $200,000 of that, and we're good to go. I said, okay, no problem. He said, but first thing, you're going to need to find a male co-founder. I said, why? He said, because nobody's going to invest in a female founder on her own. I'm like, well, I had a male co-founder and that didn't pan out for me, so I'm not going back there. So I separated myself from the accountant and the capital advisor, and I went out and raised 1.5 million, and that kind of kicked things off.
We'll just give Kylie a hand for that, please.
Thanks.
And I mean, that was how many years ago?
That was in 2021.
So 4 years later. The life cycle for startups investing in numerous of them is usually a lot less than that. So that in itself is amazing, even though it doesn't always feel that way.
Oh, hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah, like I said, and even my, I didn't share any of this with my husband because he is a total worrywart, and it would have absolutely freaked him out. So, yeah, it's tough. There's not a lot of conversation, not a lot of people that you can have these conversations with. So it was just head down, bum up, and just keep going. So we were doing really well in WA, and then South Australia reached out and said, hey, we've heard about your product. Can you please bring it to South Australia? So, well, I'm going to need more capital for that. So we raised 3.9 out of South Australia. And then it was, the next date after that started calling. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. So we're now in Northern Territory as well. So live in 3 jurisdictions, and really excited about what comes next.
It's a pretty amazing story. And I think another component within that is your ability to pause, think about what's next, and really ask the right questions. And for all of the founders in the room, there is an art to listening, ignoring some, and finding your own path and believing in what you're going to do. I think that there's a tenacity required to be on this stage telling this story. And I think that why it's so important is that it just turning up is a big part of it, and picking at those questions, whether it's, some of what's been canvas today, but truly having that drive and that connection, and rewinding to the start, that problem that you deeply understand that's still not totally fixed. I see that in you getting up every day. That's a big part of what I think is your power in this business.
So Dana talked earlier on about using your business unintegrated systems and tools. Well, I know in mine we were using up to 12 unintegrated systems and tools every day. And so it was not even giving the team the best experience. And you look at, we talked about stats this morning, 1 in 2 are on burnout. Everybody's exhausted, everybody's tired, the consumers are becoming more demanding. So yeah, how do we give the consumers an amazing experience? Because buying and selling a home should be an amazing experience. But how do we give the conveyancers the tools that they need to continue to do their job? Rebecca talked earlier on about conveyancers becoming redundant. There was a lot of talk about real estate agents becoming redundant. A lot of talk about conveyancers becoming redundant. I'm with you. I've done all the research, and every consumer has told me they are not ready to let go of the human element. But we are very much about making sure that we build technology that enables our conveyancers to be tech-enabled. And keep them moving forward. And their job will change. They may become more asset managers rather than conveyancers, more advisors. But yeah, they're not even close to becoming redundant.
Thank you. We've got to pull up there, but thanks everyone. Can you join me in thanking Kylie Dillon?
Thank you.